ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. I'm just going to take the moment to type up what I'm going to talk about today. But again, the topic is my personal journey in Sikhi, so pretty much my whole lifespan, right? Alright, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So today's topic again is just my journey into Sikhi, because honestly, like, I talk about all of this stuff and I explore all of these different opinions and about Sikhi and all of this stuff, and people are generally like, yo, you have so much knowledge and stuff, and it's like, yo, that's not just my personal like opinions. These were formed over like my whole lifetime, over the last 21 years of my life. Well, I'm old. I have gathered all of this information, and I've learned that Sikhi, everything I know about Sikhi has come through my journey as a human being, right? Journey, thank you. And as a human being and through all of my experiences. So where I'm going to start, this topic is from birth, actually. So I was born into a very, very, well, not very, very religious, but relatively religious family, right? Both of my parents were Amritari, and the second that I was born, the first thing my parents gave me was Amrit as my gurti, or like the first thing that touches your tongue is called a gurti, right? And so you can imagine that I didn't really have a choice at that time. Like, what was I supposed to say at, like, not even a year old, or even a month old or a day old. And again, I see my positives and the negatives of all of that. But so first of all, when I was born in Dubai, or UAE for most people, right? And so, like, if you ever talk to anybody and want to mention my name, just say Dubai wale, and generally they'll point towards my family, right? And so, when I was born, the first thing I got was my gurti was of Amrit, and so my parents had these expectations of me, and especially because I was the firstborn, to get involved into Sikhi. And so obviously Punjabi was my very first language. And then it was Hindi, because those are two related languages. And then I learned a little bit of Arabic, but I don't remember any of it. And I actually spent some time in school in Dubai. So they started school roughly around, like, I think it was like 2 or 3 years old. And so I spent like a year or two in their school system. Again, I don't know the specifics of it, but when I was in school there, obviously I was kind of isolated. I didn't have a lot of friends, as what I remember. Again, that I remember a lot of my childhood, but that some of those details get a little iffy, right? And I guess part of it was just the language gap and the barrier, because obviously at like 2 or 3 years old, you don't know like the differences between languages. You're just speaking whatever you were taught or learned over the time. And I went to a public school there, right? And my parents were pretty well off. Dad was a businessman and mom was a housewife. And the biggest problem was, in Dubai, unless you are a Muslim, you can't own property or your own business. So the way that anybody does business there, if you want to have a quote-unquote LLC or a personal business, you use someone else's name and someone else's paperwork and run your business through them. So you pay them part of your royalty, or a percentage, or some set rate, some sort of contract that you negotiate with them. And then they'll let you use their name, and under their name you do work. So at any point they can claim your whole business enterprise, and you can't really do anything under their law. And so a year before we came to America, My Tayaji, my Vade Papa, like I like to call him, and his two sons and his wife, moved to America, and they decided that you guys should come over as well because, well, there's more opportunity here. You don't know when you're gonna get kicked out of your houses there. They can choose when you guys come and go. Even though I was born there, I was not a permanent resident. I was not a citizen of the country, and I was not given a passport. And as my family came out of, my parents were born in the 60s, right? So they experienced Punjab and the atrocities that occur to minorities in a lot of countries. And so they decided that, what are we going to do with all this money if we can't even solidify our own future, let alone our kids? And so we moved to America. And so I was about 3 or 4 years old, right? Obviously, new country, new people, new society. Didn't know a lot of people here. I just knew my cousins. We stayed with them for a good 6 months, just to get on our feet. And so what happened after that is that Dad started working, obviously. About 6 months later, we got an apartment. We lived in an apartment, and Dad started working. And he told my mom, and this is the most stereotypical thing about Punjabi families, is, I'll provide the money and you take care of the kids. And Dad's emphasis was not the whole like superiority thing. Dad was like, someone needs to take care of the kids. I don't care if I have to work day and night. As a taxi driver, I just want to make sure our kids are well off, right? And are connected to Sikhi because I don't want them to go through all the things I did or I had to endure because my dad was, his father died when he was very, very young. My dad was about 3 or 4 years old when his father passed away. So my Dadaji passed away when my dad was about 3 or 4. And he's the youngest of 7 siblings. So their mother raised them alone, right? And so throughout all of that trauma, Dad recognized that he had all of these hardships throughout his life, like 1984, like his own family struggles, all of those things. He didn't want those same things for his children. And so he decided, you're going to stay home and your job is just going to be to take care of the kids and take care of the house. And I'll go out and get the money and we'll work that way, right? So obviously the very first thing that my mom decides to do is if for the culture, we have to stay involved in the Gurdwara. So every Sunday at that point, we became Sunday Sikhs, right? In my household, my mom always did Path and my dad always did Path. But for me and Amrit, it was like Sunday Gurdwara, Saturday Gurdwara, maybe. Just for Kirtan, excuse me. And then the rest of the week, like Japji Sahib, like the way my mom taught us Path was not very, it wasn't the best approach. It was the Dandeyala technique, which is pretty much like, you want to learn or do you want to learn? And so, and again, that does work for some people and to some degree, but I do have my questions about that, but that's a different topic. And so that's how I learned Japji Sahib and that's how I learned Punjabi. And then obviously I got involved in Punjabi school at a very young age. If any of you guys went to Punjabi school when it first started at the Renton Gurdwara, it was in the old house run by Auntie Ji, and there was not a lot of organization or anything. And so that's the days when I started Punjabi school, was like way back in those times, right? And then Khalsa Government School was founded, and then obviously I went there, and then that was around when I was 7, I think, 7 or 8. And so obviously at that point, I was being taught or explained about, like, this is Japji Sahib, just do it. Ratalona, right? Like, it's just memorization of, like, you have to do Vaheguru Simran every single day. There was a little mala or like a bead wristband, I guess you want to call it, for lack of a better term, around my wrist at a very young age. And I was told, who has to be in your live video. No. Um, and uh, then okay, so what happened at that point was that um, like they would tell me like, yo, roj path karya kar, mala, like naam simran karya kar. And when I was about 5 or 6, around that age, I started learning Gatka. That was the very first thing that very like hit me very very hard. And then what happened after that is that the teacher, all of our Gatka teacher was he left for one reason or another. I think it was Gurdwara politics at the time. I was too young to remember or understand what was going on, right? And that's how I made a lot of my friends, was through like being at the Gurdwara so much, doing Langar Seva, going there so often. Also my cousin's friends from the years prior, and just getting involved in the Gurdwara. But when I turned around 6 or 7, the pressure of Sikhi in my life increased, and I just want to emphasize at this point I was just going with the flow, right? Like my biggest incentive was to not get hit, to be involved in Sikhi, and I know that's not the best approach, and that's not a judgment on my parents. It's just the reality of it, right? That for me, that's all that it was if you don't want to get hit, you go to the Gurdwara and you do what your parents say. And so around 6 or 7, the Gurdwara started this initiative, or took this initiative of, yo, we need to teach our youth or engage our youth into Gurmat Sangeet, right? So that's like Kirtan and learning how to play the Vajja or the Tabla. And so, funny story about that. The way that it was decided that I was going to learn how to play a Vajja was, okay, so the general stereotype is men play the tabla, girls play the vajja, and they sing. And I don't know how that stereotype came to be, but that's just the reality of it, right? And so when my mom was like, one of you guys are going to learn the vajja, one of you guys are going to learn the tabla, I was a very big crybaby at the time, so I started crying and I was like, it's not going to be me. I'm going to learn how to play the tabla. I don't want to get bullied. And then obviously my brother was like, yo, it's not going to be me either. And so my mom tossed a coin, like 7 times, because we both argued back and forth that, the flip was unfair, or it landed weirdly, or whatever, else. And obviously I lost, right? So I had to play Vajja. So it was against my will. Everything that happened at this point was just like, curse you, fate. And I didn't understand any of it, and I didn't appreciate absolutely any part of it. And just me being selfish, it was like, yo, I don't want to learn this. And I'd learned a little bit of harmonium when I was like 4 or 5. So I knew how to do saregama, going up and down. So I was very cocky. And I was a very outgoing, very loud person. And I guess that's still kind of true. No, I don't know. But at the time, like, I was very cocky, and I came to class like the first day when these classes started, and I was like, yo, you guys are all beginners. Like, give me one of the people that are going to teach me. I'm going to show them like my skills. And yo, I'm going to be on the shabads already. Like, I got this. Then what happens is, some of the Paisab come and sit next to me, and they tell me, like, they're like, okay, play. And so I played, and they were like, yo, you're singing off key. I wasn't very happy with that, right? And so I picked up my Vajja. Vajja was about the size of me. I was a very tiny kid. And I moved it to the other Paisab, and I sat down, and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn from him. That other guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I play this like better than anybody's business. And so, like, at this point in my life, I started learning Kirtan. So when I was about 6 or 7, I started learning Kirtan. And then I'd already started doing part at home. Obviously, there's that pressure at home. So like every morning I woke up, and It was like 1 week it was like panj pauriyan, then it was like 10 pauriyan, then it was memorizing the 10 pauriyan, and then it was like a game, like it was a contest between me and my brother, whoever could finish fastest. Part of the story is at that point I didn't really care. I didn't understand why I was doing all of this stuff. And quite honestly, like I could give a smaller crap. Like I was just like, yo, I just don't want to get hit. Everything else, like it's whatever. I'm gonna go to school after this and I'm gonna go chill with my friends. My biggest problem was what's for longer at the Gurdwara. And then obviously over time, I went every single day. Monday through Friday was Kirtan classes. Then Santya rolled around and started getting involved in Santya. So Santya is like learning grammatical and meanings of the words, and getting involved in like cadence of like how to speak, like read Bani, and on top of that, learning how like to pronounce certain words and like the correct meanings from these people at the time. And then after that we would stay there for an extra hour or two to just for our parents to just listen to Kirtan. And so but generally, like, you know how it works, if our parents are listening to Kirtan, we're listening to Kirtan because we have to listen to Kirtan. And if you didn't listen to Kirtan when you got home, like, somebody gonna get hurt real bad, right? And so at that point it was like, it was just going through motions, and it was like, no harm no foul, like, you're gonna make me go anyways, might as well enjoy myself. The first few years I've had, interestingly, 5 different Kirtan like teachers, and the one that I have now has been my teacher since I was around like 11, I believe. But before that, my teacher was by Kulvinder Singh, and almost everyone that started doing Kirtan with me no longer does it, or if they do it, it's not around me. So it's like it's we've all gone our different paths, right, in life, and whether that's just because we just don't get along, or like family politics, or whatever's going on in our lives at that moment, we were all just learning together, and we just sat together and played, and so it wasn't. And we also have to understand that when I came to America, this is actually an important detail I forgot. I came to America right after 9/11. It was about 2-3, actually like a month, or maybe a year. I think it was a year. Month or a year, one or the other. It was in December we came to America, and so I always wore this thought. This has never changed throughout my life. I've been Jula Shak when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and that's like, what is that, like a permit before you get a license? I guess that's how I would explain that, but it still doesn't make sense to me, right? It's like half committing to Amrit. You there, but you're not there yet. It's like those teen years. And so what happened was, at this point I started kind of questioning, like older, in the third, 4th, and 5th grade, I started questioning my identity. I started questioning my language. I started questioning my religion. I started questioning all of these aspects of my life and trying to understand, do I want this? Is this a path I would personally choose? And obviously the answer inside of me was, regardless of what I think right now, I have to go through the motions, and when I get older, then I can do whatever I want. But like at that moment, I was having these identity crisis moments because I was being verbally abused. I was being told certain things. I was not making friends well or easily. I was having a hard time communicating with people. And like learning the language, so academically I was well versed, But in communicating socially, my social norms were very community oriented because I spent so much time there. And so in school, I started questioning myself. I was like, yo, what's the point of this whole religion thing if it's just going to make my life harder? Like, does it matter how many times I do Japji Sahib? Like, it's not going to, like, stop these kids from picking on me. It's not, like, at the end of the day, I'm going to end up crying. I'm going to come home and mom's not going to do anything. It's like, like, at this point, I was learning about history as well. It's like, you tell me about all of these, like, brave Sikhs and, like, Singhs and Singhniya, but where are they now, fam? Like, and so I was looking for a role model. And long story short, anybody that I ever found had clay feet. And that included my parents, and that included the Granthis at the Gurdwara, that included the Pradhans, the committee members, everyone had their flaws. And from the aspect of everything people told me about Sikhi, they were like, yo, Sikhs are supposed to stand for injustice. I'm like, yo, when I was in the 3rd grade and my brother was in 2nd grade, my brother came off the school bus with a black eye. He got on with his friend, who was our neighbor at the time. Both of them were beaten up, and the reason he beat up my brother was because he wore the star on his head. Me and him walked home from school. There was a bunch of Russian kids, and it was a white kid that beat up my brother. And they were all laughing and playing with each other and high-fiving each other or high-fiving the white kid for doing such a great thing. And it made me mad. But when I got home, I had a certain expectation in my head, like, yo, we Sikhs, there's things that we're supposed to do to fix this. I come home, I get to my mom, and she's like, whoa, what happened to his face? And then I told her the story, like, that's the kid that did it. And then she obviously went over to our neighbor's house, and both of the moms were home, right? And so they both decided to go and confront his dad. And they got cussed out. They got verbally abused. And my mom came home crying. That moment absolutely changed my view of Sikhi at the moment, and still. There's a reason why my focus on Sikhi is always about the practical more than the verbiage. Like, the reason that I quote Bani less and more focus on the characteristics of a Sikh and a Singh and the Shabd Vichar is because, to me, if we don't work on that part of it, like, I understand the Shabd Bani part is very, very important. I don't discredit that. But if we don't apply it, then that's all that we leave it at. We demean it to just the words. And so my mom came home and she was crying, and obviously they went to the school and they talked to them. And after that, me and Amrit there's only 3 kids with the star on their heads at my elementary school that I remember. And, then it became 5th grade. But in 3rd, there's 4. And the oldest one of us is actually one of my closest friends. And he didn't really face much. It was just like he had already built his social circle. I had changed schools when I came into the 2nd grade. I moved from the Kent School District to our house in Auburn. Shout out. And so when I moved here, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't have a background, and obviously I still had the language gap, kind of. And so when this took place, a year later when I was in 3rd grade and brother was in 2nd, it really shook me, and it was like, yo, it made me want to isolate myself. It made me want to step back and be like, no one is going to help me in my life. There is no avenue, there is no reason for me to follow all of this stuff because at the end of the day, it's all cons. There was no pros in it at this point in my life. It feels like I carry this identity, I get attacked. They tell me to like do part and it's going to bring me bliss and peace. It doesn't. It's supposed to be my support. It doesn't. All it is another obstacle in my day. I spend 3 hours in the afternoons and 4 hours on Saturdays and my whole day on Sundays at the Gurdwara, and none of it is serving any real purpose. And so again, like I'm like 7 years old, 8 years old, and these questions just bubbled up inside of me. They didn't exist outside. I didn't talk to anybody about this stuff. I didn't converse about it. It was just like laughing, playing, everything else. And then obviously everybody has their like family stuff, and also I was just a very sensitive kid on topics like, I would cry very, very easily. So things would get to me very easily, right? And over time, I started realizing that, what they're preaching isn't what they're doing. What all of these people are saying isn't what they're doing. The words aren't wrong. It's the application of them. And this epiphany hit me like when I was about in 5th grade and I started asking questions about gay marriage, right? And obviously I was a homophobe at this point of my life because that's just what we're taught, right? Boy and boy is gay and all that stuff. And what I learned is that I decided to ask my parents about this topic, and I was like, if we truly mean that, truly stand for equality, then we would stand for gay rights. Like, as much as I don't like it, like, they're still people. And shout out to one of my cousins. She absolutely went after me for this topic at the time, and she was like, that's not right for you to think that gay people are different or wrong. And she wasn't the biggest follower of Sikhi, and I was like, maybe religion isn't needed. Maybe you can, like, be an atheist, like, don't believe in religion, don't care about it. Like, or even if you're religious, but not to the extent that, like, other people around me were, maybe you'll just be fine. And so I was just like, how come she has a better understanding of equality than most people that I know that are religious? And same thing happened with feminism. I was completely against the idea of feminism. I was like, men are stronger, men are more intelligent, men are this and men are that. And she tore me a new one for that topic as well. And I remember this conversation. We were driving in the car, me, Amrit, and my cousin. And like this topic got touched somehow. And I think we were listening to Justin Timberlake, and I was like, I don't want to listen to this. Obviously I love Justin Timberlake now, but anyways, back in the day I was on crack. And I was like, I don't want to listen to this. He sounds like a chick. And me and Amrit were laughing, and my cousin goes, so what? Like, what if he sounds like a girl? He like sounds like a bomb girl, and I bet he gets more girls than you will ever. And obviously I was like 7 or 8, and just the dynamic between our family was just like that, we talk like that to each other. And so then we got into this conversation about feminism, and she pretty much gave me like a new butthole that day. And then it made me wonder, like, about that whole equality thing. And that's where I truly get my views on feminism and equality, is just those conversations. But then as I grew older, I was still learning Kirtan, and I started learning the Shabad, Aval Allah Noor Apaya Kudrat ke sab bande, Ek Noor de sab jag upjya kaun pale ko mande. And it's like, we hear that from the Gurdwara like at least once a year. At least. Why is it that we don't apply that stuff? And then my trust on people was the second thing to go. and I started trusting Bonnie more than I started trusting people. I didn't want to hear other people's translations because at the end of the day, people could not be trusted to adhere to those things or even give you proper information. And that's also at the age where I was like, yo, that's where my respect for just simply age went out the window. Just because you're older than me doesn't make you like a better person, and it doesn't make you a role model. Your age is just your age. Yes, you have more experience than me, but what did that experience give to you? What did you gain from it? And so that's where that part of me comes from. It's just those years of seeing all of these adults, that like old people with like chittiyan dadiyan or white hairs, giving these ideas, and then along comes this high schooler who knew more or understood these topics more, and she wasn't religious, and she was just powerful and courageous, and she stood her ground, and she spoke with facts instead of emotions. And it was like, oh, okay, you know what, you're right, okay, feminism, yes, let's go. And then I started studying Sikhi on my own. I started reading whatever I could. We had bedtime stories at home that we read over years. I started reading them by myself and trying to understand the meanings of those stories beyond just the content. Because we know what the arguments usually are about those sakhiyan. Did Makkah move? Did the patthar move? Did fruit fall from the trees? Did Pailana ji actually eat deer? Or a dead corpse? Or all of those little arguments we have. And I tried to get around that. I was just like, hold on, we're missing something here in all of these stories. So I started re-educating myself on these topics. All of the things that I thought I knew, I started reading again. And then at this point, I got back into Gatka. Sadnam Singh came back to the Gurdwara, and I got involved in Gatka for another 2 or 3 years. So this is around when I was like, I want to say 10 to 13 years old. Like that was the age range of when I was learning Gatka again, or Shastra Vidya. I spelled journey wrong. I just realized that. Anyways, and so I started listening to Katha, and I started understanding that these are just viewpoints of other people. These aren't set in stone, and even as much as these people want to convince me otherwise, I've learned that everybody's just walking their own path, and everybody is just, they're talking from the depth that they understand these things. And even sometimes the depth isn't always Sikhi related, it's themselves, and they have their own demerits and their own faults that are misguiding or misconstruing the information that they think that they know, if that makes sense. And so I started thinking of these things as viewpoints more than just fact, and started reading, obviously started arguing with people more often about these topics, and it was, and discussing with other people, and especially my dad. Again, for the longest time, I didn't see my father much. He worked night shifts. During the day, he would sleep. Like, me and Amrit weren't allowed to make a peep of a noise while Dad was home and sleeping, because he had to wake up like 6 hours later and go back to work. And like literally the conversation with Dad, even while growing up and going to middle school and high school, was over the phone, and it was like, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, how are you? Good. Did you do part? And then it was like, yes, okay, good job. Alright, I'll see you later. It's like, alright, bye. Or it was, did you do part? No, I didn't. You should do part. Okay, bye. And that was the extent of our conversation, right? But over the course of the years, Dad, like, as financial situations and all of those things, just being like immigrants to a new country and trying to get established. Over the years, as we became more economically sound, and established ourselves in this country, obviously that changed. Like dad spent more time at home, and dad being the more Sikh inspired person in my life, he would love having these conversations and discussions with me on these topics, and like days would pass where like the same topic would be talked about for like 3 days on end. And sometimes we still don't agree because like as much as dad would like to call himself impartial, he does have his cultural views, right? Where he was raised and where he grew up, all of those things come into play. And so when these topics come up in our family, in our household, I've learned that, then you need to start looking outside. What started happening was these conversations started going outside of our community. And this started happening around the age of 12 or 13, when it was like 5th grade to 6th grade, when that transition was occurring. Most of my friends were not Punjabi because I didn't have that community around me. In Auburn, I think in my grade alone, we had about 5 Punjabis, and everyone else was some other race, religion, culture. And so that's where my exposure began. And again, I changed schools when I got into 4th grade or 5th grade. So from 4th to 5th grade, a new school was built in my area. And so that's where I ended up going. So new area or new school, new culture. And obviously, like after my previous moves, I had learned how to make friends more easily. And what had occurred was when these discussions happened, or when I started playing basketball at my school, you could just tell from people's mannerisms that, like, how they were. And so it would ignite conversations that were informal, and they weren't directly about religion, but it just helped form my understanding about these topics. And it's like, okay, this is the Bani. What is the Bani saying? Like literally, what is it saying? And then being like, okay, what is it truly trying to say to me? Like, what is speaking from this Bani to me, personally? And what ended up happening was that these conversations took place with Muslims. They took places with Christians, with Jews, with Buddhists, with every group of, child at the time. And Hindus and every other group out there. And they spoke to the limit of their knowledge, right? But it made me interested in understanding other cultures, other religions, others' teachings. Because a lot of these things, like, kind of interconnected with one another. Other religions had traits, like Islam. This is something that I found very interesting at the very beginning of my research about this. The 5 pillars of Islam include essentially daswand, which is 10% of your earnings should go to non-profit works. And I was like, me too. Like, that's written in, like, Ratnama. That, me, you, same wavelength. And so it made me very, like, curious. It was like, maybe this whole idea of Sikhi was not like, let me create an isolated group of people. And then that idea was facilitated and reinforced with like shabads like Turki Bani Aayi, Tin Sagli Chinta Mitai, like the core essence, from the very core, from the root of all existence, this revelation has come. And from that revelation hitting me and coming to me, all of my anxiety, all of my worries of this world have gone away and perished. And so then I got more curious, and then the conversation that started going through my head was, okay, now I know that the only source for Sikhi is not Guru Granth Sahib Ji itself. It's, here's the topics, here's what I'm trying to teach you. Go use it and learn for yourself. And then over time, over years, over days and days, what started occurring to me was, yo, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not something you just read. It's something you apply. And from applying it, through your mistakes, through these questions that you have, you learn what Sikhi is about. It's not just sitting around doing part. It's not just sitting there doing Nam Japana. It's the implementation of these topics, of these learnings. And then what crossed my mind was the fact that, yo, okay, if this is occurring, then why is it that I'm the only one in my friends group that cares about this? Why is it that, like, Amrit isn't involved in Sikhi, and why is it that I should get involved? Like, why is it all falling on my head? Like, it's not my job to teach other people Sikhi. You're supposed to be doing you. And at that point, it was like, to each their own. I'm not gonna bother you anymore because you think I'm a nuisance. And so it became very introspective, inward facing, like, learning, right? And that was already occurring otherwise, because it was like, I'm no longer seeking my research and basing my words off of someone else's understanding of all of this stuff. And at this point, it was like, I'm not even going to discuss this with people in my own community. My conversations are with other people, because my community kind of cray. And yeah, again, that's hyperbolic and that's incorrect, but that was my reality at the moment. And so again, it continued that I went to the Gurdwara, same thing, spent every single evening, almost any free time I ever had was at the Gurdwara, until I hit high school, and then college, when I was 16. And then I stopped going so much because my parents understood my pressures, playing sports, getting involved in school, staying involved and getting ready for, like, university and all of that stuff. All of those things, like, my parents were understanding of, and then they stopped making us go as much. It was more like, the second I get in a car, I'll be able to go again. But in high school, some of my friends started keeping their hair and other people cut their hair. And then I was reading Japji Sahib one morning, and this idea of ke nede ke dur, like, showed up at the end, right? Karmi apo apani ke nede ke dur. Jinni naam te aaya gya masakat ka nanak te mukh ujale kiti shutti naal. And till this point, it was like, what my understanding of this was, yo, some people are closer, some people are further from God, like, let people do their own thing. If you're closer, cool, you're gonna be killing the game, fam. If people are further away, and this was based off the physical appearance. It was like, yo, some people cut their hair, okay, they want to walk away from God, that's cool. And it's not their, like, and it irked me, obviously. And it was like, all right, fine. If you want to burn in hell, burn in hell. Because that was my understanding of God. God was personified in my head. God was like Mr. God in the air, white beard, Chitta Damalla, like Chitti Pug, and he was just standing there with a danda, and it was a he. And it was like, okay, ke nede ke dur. Some people are gonna be further, some people are closer. And obviously that's a very naive way of thinking, because over a course of time, so some things happened at the Gurdwara, and I can't even completely talk about it because I don't know all the details, and I don't like speculating, and plus spreading rumors is not my thing. That some people were kicked out of the Gurdwara, and they were the most, well, some of the most revered people at the Gurdwara in the community, and they had done some very heinous things to other people, right? That was the accusation. And so they got kicked out of the Gurdwara, and again, my belief system was kind of shook one more time. And I learned that, Kenere Kedur is not about me keeping my hair and other people cutting it. It's some people are chained down from society. Okay, let's just take cutting hair for example. Some people are chained down in society because society's gonna shame you for not cutting your hair and be like, oh, you look like a wildebeest. And on the other side, if you decide to cut your hair as a Sikh, society's gonna do the exact opposite and be like, oh, you want to cut your hair? You don't want to be Sikh anymore, fam? Like, galt paase nu chaliya or challaya or whatever, right? And that's the exact opposite spectrum of it. And it's like, at that point, it was like, Kenere ke dur is not of physical appearance, but of accepting that there are certain aspects of you that aren't there yet, and there's other aspects that are there. And just because you're breaking the societal bonds from everybody else, like, there's a reason why my dadi, the way that I look, like the way I tie my dastar, is the way it is, because societal pressures will not cause me to tie something. I will tie it because I want to, and it's of my own merit. There is, because that we're walking a very thin line at that point, right? And that's what I learned. Because when I hit around 13 or 14 and my dadi started coming in, people were like, oh, yo, tie the malla, tie a bug, it doesn't look nice. Shit still happens. Like, to this day, whenever I go to the Gurdwara or anywhere and I wear this, either people still say that or they think it and they won't say it out loud because they're like, yo, Jess is just hella stubborn. Which, you're entitled to your opinion, right? But on one side, you get stigmatized if you don't cut your hair from the Western culture. And if you do cut your hair, you're stigmatized by our own people. But what Sikhi says is, yo, it doesn't matter what other people say. It's what you are doing. It's between you and your guru. And so that's when I learned it. I was just like, yo, I'm not gonna let someone else tell me when I'm gonna tie the star on my head. I have my own goals attached to my damalla, to my dastar, that I'm gonna reach someday. And then there's a shabad that shows up in Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Bani, and he says, "Koi akhe putna, koi bet Allah," right? So these are things that are being said to Guru Nanak at his time in his life. And it's like, some people call me someone that's bewitched, someone that has a demon inside of them. Koi bet Allah, someone that's stranded, that doesn't know what the hell they're doing with their life. And so Guru Nanak's like, okay, like, call me what you want to do. Like, but at the end of the day, I'm just, like, I'm trying to get to my guru. That's all that matters to me. Teri bhagta na shodu pa me lok hase. And that's like, I would never leave the remembrance and the side of my guru, even if people are laughing at me. And I think that's Bhagat Ravidas Ji's Bani. Or, yeah. And there's countless shabads that say that same exact thing. It's like, yo, stop doing things because people are telling you to do them. Do them because it makes sense to you. It's what you want to do, and it's your way of breaking those chains from everyone and everything. And again, there's a responsibility there. It's not like ser ganja kar lo. Like, that's one way to go about it. I mean, but there's this self-identity thing that also matters in Sikh falsafa or philosophy, right? That's, again, a different topic that we'll get to. And so, when I was around that age of 13 or 14, and these topics started hitting me, of like people pressuring me into tying the stara, my peers were tying the stara, Everybody was starting to do it, and I had a younger brother who looks up to me to some degree, and those things do catch up to you, right? Like it's like, oh, you don't tie one, your brother's not gonna tie one, no one's gonna tie one in your household, and what are you doing? Like, and then obviously at home it was the same thing. It was like mom saying that, dad saying that, and when my daddy did come in, they were like, oh, you shouldn't leave it open like that. You should put it up. You should do this. You should do that. Um, and then it was like, isn't that the exact reason we are told to stay this way? Is because we're not supposed to care about all that stuff. This is a passive rebellion towards all that that stands for. It's like I'm not going to be chained down. I'm not going to be told what to do with my life. I'm going to do it for my guru and for a realization of myself, and I will get there someday. And this is just one aspect of that. And that didn't hit me until I was around the age of 14. And so the Kene Reke Dur aspect of it changed from this one dimension of the physical into the mental and the emotional more than the physical. And obviously, we most human beings have this urge for overcorrecting, right? If they see a deficiency in something, they overcorrect and do it more than it should be done. And balance is something that we don't do a very good job of. And so that's what I was focusing on, was the balance aspect of it all. I was working on being like, yo, it doesn't matter how you look. All that matters is that you follow this path, and that's it. But then what happened next? Now that's an interesting story. I started walking around, and well, actually no, 2008. I was, oh wait, this was way before. This is when I was 8 years old. Yeah, no. I was 11. I was 11 years old, and my parents got a call at about approximately like 9 or 10 p.m. from my badi mama, or my tai, that my taiaji had been attacked, and while he was at work, and he's in the emergency room, and like, get here. So we were about getting ready for going to bed. It was a school night, um, and we end up going to the hospital. No one told us what was going on, and I walk in, and my taiaji, my birthday papa, is one of the most dearest people to me because he's hilarious, and just because of our bond, right? Um, and so just seeing him laying there, like, it made me like enraged. It was like, yo, what is this identity worth if this is what's gonna happen to us? And like, that was the very first thought. And then after I had time to think about it all, what actually ended up happening was the guy was caught. It was a hate crime. He was charged with it. And then my Tayaji decided to drop the charges. And yo, there were so many people that were like, that hated that that he did that. They were like, what are you doing? Like, this is gonna keep happening. We need to make an example out of this guy. And he was like, yo, I did make an example out of him. The example was, yo, it's not gonna solve anything. We need to be able to love, we need to be able to forgive, and make sure that that person doesn't make those same mistakes, and he, through his word of mouth, changes his culture. And that's all we can hope for long-lasting change. Because if we send this guy to jail, what's going to come of it, right? And how that changed and impacted me was, yo, it made me realize how much the physical mattered. Like, if he didn't dress the way he did, if he didn't look the way he did, if he didn't carry himself the way he did, that guy wouldn't have truly meant the apologies that he made to my birthday papa, or to my tayaji, to my uncle. And after that, my fights at school, all of the other stuff that was going on in my life changed. it was no longer me wanting to fight with them, and those people became my friends, believe it or not. And there's some of them are still my friends. I'm not gonna lie. I still talk to them. I still go grab lunch with them, and these are friends from elementary school. That like they were the ones that said the racist rhetoric, the ones that said hurtful comments. But at the end of the day, what it came down to was, yo, I have the power. I was given the power to look different, be different, and be okay with it. Even though I hated that gift to some degree, it taught me the responsibility and the principles of living up to that and being comfortable in my own skin, regardless of how much crap I had to go through for it. And that's how I became this, like, person that's very comfortable in his own skin, and it's very live and let live, and just make an example out of your own life, right? And that's what everybody does, or everybody should aspire to do if they aren't doing that. And so what I'm trying to say is Bonnie has guided every aspect of my life, from my childhood to my adolescence to my teenage years to who I am today as an adult. It didn't start, it wasn't like poof, it was like 6 month transition to become a Sikh. It was a whole life. I have had 21 years of ups and downs and twisty turns, and there's a lot of stuff I've left out, just because it's personal information and it's very personal and dear to me, right? But, actually, no, there's something I want to share. I've dealt with depression twice. Um, the first time was very, very stupid, but it still hit me because of just the age I was in. I was in 9th grade or 10th grade when it hit me. It was over a girl. It always is, right? And it was like the feeling of being abandoned by, first of all, the person that I didn't date. It was just a crush. Um, just a feeling of abandonment, right? And it was like, yo, everybody's gonna leave me this way. And it was just that realization of like, and then there was a shabad that hit me like pretty hard, and it was Jagat Machuti Dekhi Preet. And obviously, in my hate, like all of that stuff was like, yeah, all that exists in this world is fake love. Screw people and all of that stuff. It was like, no, that shabad has a deeper meaning. It's like, that's all I've seen in the world, but that's not what I need to be. After I had some time to think about that, and while I was dealing with all of this stuff, it was like, yo, that's the world, but that's not how I want to leave it. I want people to be able to love each other beyond that. Because I felt in my self-image, I understood what it meant for people to love for the sake of their own. Like, saying, oh, kidna paji, like, oh, by the way, we need $2,500 for the Gurdwara, but you never talk to this person on a daily basis ever. You see those things happen like every single day. It's like, doki bahut matlabiya, right? People are all very, very purposeful for why they come and talk to you, interact with you. Heck, some people only say hi to you just so that they can keep tabs on you and use you at the right moment, right? I'm not gonna deny that. And then what ended up happening was, when I finally snapped out of it, and it took its process, it took its time, and it took embracing everything that was happening in my life to get out of that situation of depression and just letting it run its course. Obviously, I couldn't talk to my parents. I couldn't talk to our community about it. Even my friends, very, very few people knew about it because it was very near and dear to me. And I just didn't let it get out. Like, it was something that I had to deal with, and something that I felt like as a man, as a male in our community, I couldn't talk about it. I will continue these stories and this conversation some other day. I have 18 seconds left. Please tell me how you guys like this. Whenever you get a moment, DM me, just message me, or say something. I love to hear you guys' opinions and thoughts on all of this. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.